Now, since I did Metallica, it's only natural that I continue this series of Then and Now with Megadeth. Now, whether you're on either side of the Metallica versus Megadeth rivalry, the fact of the matter is, I love both bands. Each band has had their ups and downs. Each band has had albums that are freaking amazing and are among the top albums, period. But this video will be about Megadeth and will be about their history musically and thematically. So if you're expecting this to be a Metallica versus Megadeth comparison video, I'll save that for the next Coyote Rant. How about that? Let's begin. This is Dave Mustaine in the early 1980s. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that he is the face of Megadeth, often leading some people to call the band Megadeth. It is widely known by now, even to the most casual rock music fans, that Dave Mustaine was originally the lead guitarist in Metallica until 1983, when the band opted to kick him out due to his violent alcoholic behavior and drug problems. But even the guys in Metallica to this day will stress that early on, basically up until Cliff Burton came along, that Dave was the only musician in the group that could actually play. And his legacy in Metallica still lives on in songs off their Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning albums. So, a couple months later, Dave Mustaine and David Ellefson formed the band Megadeth. Yes, it was an immediate response to him being fired from his previous band, essentially saying, "Screw you guys, I'm forming another band that'll be better than you." After settling on Chris Poland and Gar Samuelson on lead guitar and drums respectively, the first lineup was formed for the 1985 release of Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, which famously features the song The Mechanics, a song that Mustaine originally played with Metallica, who changed it into their own song, The Four Horsemen, but they still gave him writing credit. In response, Mustaine included The Mechanics to, quote, straighten Metallica up. Mustaine later recalled, "All I remember was I wanted blood, theirs, and I want to be faster and heavier than them." Killing Is My Business is an album that is lightning fast and thrashy compared to every subsequent Megadeth release afterwards. What Dave Ellefson says about Killing Is My Business, he says, extreme speed was deemed the cool factor in thrash metal back in those days. You had Anthrax and Slayer's second albums out at the time, Spreading the Disease and Hell Awaits respectively, so Megadeth needed to make an impact, and this album did just that. And it cemented their place with all the other bands I mentioned being in the big four of thrash metal. Just like all the big four bands, the first album's production is what makes the album lack and hold up. But it still keeps that powerful punch, and anyone needing a good classic thrash metal to get the veins pumped, this is a good way to go. Killing Is My Business also explores gloomy lyrical subjects such as death, violence, occultism, which prompted many people to associate the band early on with Satanism, much like how Slayer was perceived as well. Mustaine always denied those allegations, saying, "Why support the devil? He's already there. I'd rather just effing thrash and be a metalist than listen to whatever I want than be forced to listen to one style of music." Now it's funny, Megadeth has been around for the better part of 30 years. And even today, I've been to countless church services that have associated Megadeth with a place of burning heathenism, as a pastor once called it. And in my mind, I'm laughing and I'm going, does this Yahoo not know that Dave Mustaine is actually a Christian now? They honestly had no idea what they were talking about. Now, I'll get to Dave Mustaine's Christianity later, but nowadays I can actually defend a lot of metal acts today because many of them do have members that are Christian or religious in some form. The 1986 release, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying, was a huge step maturity-wise for the band, with a much better production sound and the band exploring a bit more melody while keeping true to the thrash sound. While there were definitely songs about infidelity, black magic, and the occult, Peace Sells is the album where political subjects became a staple of Megadeth's lyrical themes. Mustaine and Ellefson have said that they wanted to change the perception of heavy metal by writing songs that contain socially aware lyrics. Mustaine was doing this in response to mainstream metal bands of the time singing about hedonistic pleasures. And I'm talking about bands like Motley Crue and Poison. The song Peace Sells, accompanied by that famous music video, is among the band's first hits. It is essentially Mustaine's political and social beliefs. Peace Sells is where Megadeth began to break out and be noticed. The music video would be a staple of MTV for years and exposed the band to the masses. 1988 saw the release of So Far So Good So What. At the time, So Far So Good So What was well received by critics and fans alike as a great follow-up to Peace Sells. But many retrospective reviews tend to be more critical of it, saying it didn't have the same punch and conceptual unity as before, and many say it felt somewhat inspired. People say this is considered an average album for Megadeth, good but not great, and I'm surprised that many fans seem to forget about this one, because I disagree with a lot of the critics, and I feel that the familiar Megadeth thrash metal sound was there, and it contains one of the best songs written by the band, In My Darkest Hour, a song that was written by Dave Mustaine in response to the passing of Metallica's Cliff Burton. It was a great emotional song and a fantastic heavy metal anthem. So I say So Far So Good So What is underrated. But we can all agree that their fourth release, Rust in Peace, is by far one of the best albums, period. It's not just a great thrash metal album, not even just a great heavy metal album. Rust in Peace is a great album in general, and it's often included on many lists like 500 albums you need to listen to before you die. Musically, it is just masterful, and I can't say enough good things about it. Lyrically, the band continues the political subjects, especially war, and in the place of the occult themes, you have songs about UFO and conspiracies, as well as Dave Mustaine's inner problems with alcohol. Musically, it showcases Mustaine's writing talent and musicianship to the fullest. It is more complex than prior albums, with lots of tempo changes and multiple sections put in each song. Holy Wars, Hangar 18, Take No Prisoners, Tornado of Souls, and the title track are among the band's best standalone tracks, and are rightfully so heavy fan favorites. Now, I may sound like I'm giving Rust in Peace a hand job, but that is because it's just that damn good. And there's many reasons why this album always holds up, but if I listened to them all, it would take forever, so I must move on. After the constant lineup changes in the mid to late 80s, Rust in Peace also saw the lineup finally settle into what is known as the classic lineup, with Marty Friedman and Nick Menza taking over guitar and drum duties respectively. Many fans say out of all the lineups during the rotation, they consider this one to be the definitive lineup. Follow-up to Rust in Peace came in 1992 with Countdown to Extinction. Lyrically, the album continues the same political military undertones, this time with songs referencing the Gulf War and even the first George Bush. Other songs, particularly Sweating Bullets, highlight Mustaine battling his inner self. Musically, Countdown to Extinction is a response to Metallica's Black Album, which opened the door for bands to approach writing simpler songs and incorporating more melodic mid-tempo songs into its traditional sound, most notably Symphony of Destruction. So Countdown to Extinction is not really considered a thrash metal album, but a more traditional heavy metal album, and it remains a solid effort. And while there are certainly some gems, I unfortunately think Countdown suffers from having too much mid-tempo. And at times I find myself wishing for the technical, complex sound from Rust in Peace to come back, just for a song or two. But it still doesn't take away that Countdown to Extinction was the band's most successful commercial release in all their history. With Megadeth at their peak and the band coming to grips with their fame, it was a time of problems and conflicts for Megadeth. That in every 2 weeks or so, according to Mustaine, there were outrageous and emotional interventions in order to make the group a democracy. Many band meetings during this period concerned Mustaine's creative control, over a quote successful formula, so that the rest of the band could continue to exercise their creativity. They wanted to add their input. Euthanasia followed in 1994. While the band was given more freedom in the writing process, the musical direction opted for more of a mainstream sound, with stronger vocal melodies and more radio-friendly arrangements. As a result, it was a further departure from the thrash metal sound than Countdown to Extinction was. Certainly there were standouts like Reckoning Day, Train of Consequences, and the power ballad type song A To Them On. Euthanasia as a whole felt like an average effort, and had many thrash metal fans scratching their head, while the more accessible music caught on to wider audiences. 1997, Cryptic Writings was released, and it was pretty much more of the same, but the political themes were toned down to make the music more inclusive for a wider audience. Most of it was the same mid-tempo structure that plagued Euthanasia, but there were some fast and crunchy songs like She-Wolf and Disintegrators to remind the longtime fans they were still capable of producing good thrash songs. Once again, we had an average album with some hidden gems. During this time, Megadeth wasn't really at a low point. They were releasing successful albums on the chart and touring relentlessly to support the more accessible albums of the time. It was simply a boring time. It was the 1999 release of Risk that many fans saw Megadeth bringing themselves down in the gutter. The name Risk is a reference to the band taking more risks with their sound. The band wanted to do something completely different that they had never done before, and to try and break through with the alternative radio scene that was getting big at the time. What resulted was an album that sounded much more like hard rock with none of the familiar Megadeth sound. And not surprisingly, there was a backlash among fans who were tired of the band deviating from Rust in Peace. In response to Risk's lack of success, Mustaine has said that the reason why it didn't sell was because Megadeth's name was on it, and if anyone else's name was on the album, it would have sold better. Risk is where the band was at their lowest, and to this day, many longtime fans like to ignore it even exists, even though it does have the diamond in the rough we know as Prince of Darkness. Surely each release up until the point of Risk would have one or two gems in each album, but it was nothing like the albums prior to Rust in Peace, where it was a general great listening experience from end to end. So by this point, it became very apparent that Megadeth was a hit or miss band, with the songwriting being rather inconsistent at times. So you had songs that were so great and going, yeah, I love Megadeth. And then you had songs that had everybody scratching their head like, what the hell is this? But remember, by this point, Megadeth had released 7 albums, roughly every 2 to 3 years. You can't expect every release to be as brilliant as Rust in Peace, but it seems that for every Rust in Peace, there's a Risk. For every Peace sells, there's a Euthanasia or a Cryptic Writings. After Cryptic Writings, the band's classic lineup would start to break apart. First when Nick Menza would leave the band due to health reasons, and then Marty Friedman would grow tired of what in his mind was pop-influenced metal that Megadeth was playing at the time, and would leave during the Risk tour. Now of course their positions were replaced, but many fans didn't get the same feeling with them, and began losing touch with Megadeth once more. In response to the backlash of Risk, Megadeth began writing more traditional Megadeth style songs. You had Mustaine begin writing most of the songs as opposed to the creative freedom during the mid-90s, and what resulted was an album that sounded much heavier and closer to their thrash metal roots than the stuff that was made in the mid to late 90s. The World Needs a Hero is seen as that return to form, or as a start of it. Most notably, it contains the song Return to Hangar, which was a sequel to Hangar 18. The World Needs a Hero was okay, good, but not great. In 2002, Dave Mustaine announced that he was disbanding Megadeth due to an arm injury, rendering him unable to play guitar. His injury, caused by the compression of his radial nerve, was so severe he couldn't even make a closed fist with his left hand at one point. After a year of recovery, and essentially reteaching his left hand how to play guitar again, Mustaine began working on what was supposed to be a solo album, which due to contractual obligations was to be released under the Megadeth name one last time, and thus the band was reformed. While Mustaine would try to get the classic lineup back together, only Menzo would agree to return before being sent home a few days later after rehearsals due to being, quote, insufficiently prepared, according to Mustaine. Ellefson saw this as an insult and had a severe disagreement over the royalties and rights to Megadeth's name and back catalog. After unsuccessfully filing a lawsuit, Dave Ellefson and Dave Mustaine would go their separate ways for several years. Now, it was also during this time that Dave Mustaine became a born-again Christian. To me, this is essentially the line between the Megadeth of the 80s and 90s versus the Megadeth now. So you could call it Megadeth BC and Megadeth AD, if you will. While many metalheads hated Dave Mustaine for his attitude over the years due to his feuds with members of other bands, him becoming a Christian would also add fuel to the fire, especially when it became his policy not to appear with any band that is seen as black metal or satanic. Most notably, when he declined to appear in a music festival that also had the band Rotting Christ on the bill. He would also opt not to play songs in his back catalog having to do with black magic and the occult, and even fan favorites like The Conjuring due to his spiritual beliefs. Compare that in contrast to Tom Araya, who has strong personal spiritual beliefs of his own, yet will still sing lyrics like God Hates Us All, and still sing the classic Slayer songs. Hence, many fans get irritated and lose respect towards Mustaine as a person. So for many fans, the day Mustaine became a Christian was the day they stopped following and supporting Megadeth. It wasn't necessarily because of his beliefs, it was because he was the type of Christian that everyone hates, the ones that can't seem to separate religion from politics. The things he said just seemed to irritate more and more people, especially when he appeared to do a 180 and started speaking against things he wouldn't have spoken of against during the BC days, essentially giving the band bad press. Add this to the fact that many people have always disliked Dave's nasally voice while trying to appreciate the good music, and if they can't stand Dave as a person, then of course it's going to be tough to get into a band where you can't stand the guy as a person that's singing the songs. Plus, the other thing about Mustaine was that throughout his existence, whether BC or not, he has always come off as a dick. He was one that never seemed to keep his mouth closed. YouTuber Cover Killer Nation, a guy with a great outlook on the world of heavy metal in general, has said that Dave was almost like the Kanye West of his time when he was talking big of himself, however also talking down on those around him. If I were to list all the derogatory comments he made over the years about Metallica and other bands, this video would take forever once again. Musically, the solo album that became 2004's The System Has Failed continues the trend with The World Needs a Hero. It has standout tracks like Blackmail the Universe, Kick the Chair, and Back in the Day, and to me as a whole was much more solid. And it appeared Megadeth was finally out of the gutter and back to being relevant again. The thrash was becoming more apparent, and the traditional political lyrics seemed to hit home much more. While there were also songs incorporating Mustaine's Christian beliefs, with the song Shadow of Death containing a recital of Psalm 23. Unfortunately, many fans felt this was Megadeth, not Megadeth, since Dave Ellefson was anti-Megadeth at this point. It was almost like when Axl Rose was performing and releasing music at the time under Guns N' Roses' name, even though we all knew it wasn't the same Guns N' Roses because there was no Slash, Izzy, or Duff. However, Mustaine, to his credit, felt like he should continue on as a solo artist and considered finally disbanding Megadeth after System Has Failed. But because of the album's success and the subsequent tour, he decided to continue on and record as Megadeth. 2007 saw the release of United Abomination, which was another solid effort, even better than its predecessor. It also added much more speed and thrash that many fans felt was missing. Songs like Washington Is Next, Sleepwalker, and Never Walk Alone are among my favorites. Thematically, this album was centered on the choices the US government was making at the time. In 2009, Endgame was released, and then you had songs like This Day We Fight, Head Crusher, Bite the Hands, and The Right to Go Insane make it a solid thrash metal album. And once again, the overall music just kept getting better and better. With each release from 2004 to 2009 getting better each release, one would hope that maybe, just maybe, Megadeth was no longer hit or miss. Then you had 2010, fans getting excited when Mustaine and Ellison put aside their differences, and thus Dave Ellison was once again back in the band. And the famous twosome was back together. Naturally, what was going to be released with the two of them working together again was going to be heavily anticipated. 2011 didn't disappoint with the release of 13, obviously named because it was Megadeth's 13th release. 13 was once again a solid effort, quite possibly one of the best albums since Rust in Peace, and that's saying a lot. Pretty much everything about Megadeth is present. It has the classic thrash, the heavy mid-tempo, the amazing solos, and everything in between. 13 represented a new height of Megadeth's resurgence in the metal world, with the music output being top-notch. But, once again, Megadeth showed they were human after all with the release of Super Collider in 2013. This album was seen as another return to simpler commercial stuff, and many fans even went as far as comparing it to Risk. It has a few simple good songs like Kingmaker, but the album as a whole is more mid-tempo filler that we already got tired of in the 90s. The kind of stuff that fans really didn't want to endure again. Not surprisingly, Super Collider had mixed reviews for the most part, and to many fans it was a disappointment. Once again, things were brought back down and provided more fuel for the fans who say Megadeth is inconsistent. Thankfully, Megadeth learned from their mistakes, and the 2016 release of Dystopia was released to much more fanfare and better reception. It was the second highest rated album to debut on the Billboard, just one seat below Countdown to Extinction. Critics and fans alike once again said the album was much more of a return to the classic Megadeth sound. That about wraps it up with Megadeth's history. Right now, they're showing no signs of stopping, and while I don't expect every one of their releases to be a hit, one thing that has always been consistent about Megadeth is every album always has one or two great songs. Enough at this point to make a greatest hits compilation box set of 30 to 40 songs. Now, I didn't go into huge detail over each album. When your band releases 15 albums and you're trying to save time not to have the video go on for too long, naturally I'll miss all the tiny details. That's also because Megadeth, while yes, they have their musical changes throughout their 3 decades, the central political themes have stayed relatively the same. And when you accept it as part of the band's trademarks, it's just something you expect from them. Some albums are more political, others are not. Some albums are more about the inner struggles of Mustaine, others aren't. All I can really hope for now is that their lineup can stay stable. While none of the musicians in Megadeth have ever been bad, it's just a pain in the ass to have to keep up with the new changes, which is why I'm not going into detail over all of them. And right as I wrote the narration for this video, the drummer for the album Dystopia, Chris Adler, left the band due to his commitments with Lamb of God. It's like Bobby Hill and King of the Hill going, "They broke up? I didn't even read the magazine where they got together." So one can only hope that after 30 years, the lineup can stay stable and they could just make music for the fun of it without too much lineup crap. And hopefully the band can actually get it right to what works and what doesn't. Most Megadeth fans love the thrash complex stuff that they've been putting out on a more consistent basis over the past decade. Megadeth always seems to get mixed reactions every time they do more commercial sounding albums. Kind of like another certain band that throughout the first 20 years, Dave Mustaine always seemed to write music in response to what his other band was doing at the time. So, you want me to go over the Metallica versus Megadeth rivalry? Well, stay tuned for the next video, which will be on a Coyote rant. I'm Desert Coyote 22. Thanks for watching.